There are still shockwaves over the upcoming resignation of Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. That happens in January. Greene made the surprise announcement online Friday night during this very show. It's unclear what she'll do next after 5 years in office. She started as one of the president's staunchest supporters and will leave Congress branded as a traitor by him after their very public falling out. Jeff Seleny went to her district in Northwest Georgia to see how voters are reacting.
We wanted Marjorie to be Marjorie. We appreciate her. She doesn't blend into the curtains like other people do up in Washington.
Like so many others here in Georgia, David Goldenshoe was talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and the bombshell announcement she will resign from Congress in January. But unlike most who only talk about her, he knows her well. And after finishing his weekly radio show today, he said three things above all explain why she's leaving.
She may be very, very, very conservative.
Okay, so something absolutely wild just happened in the Senate. And I mean wild, the kind of thing you usually only see in movies about political chaos. A group of senators, Republican senators, just staged a walkout. They literally stood up in the middle of debate and walked off the Senate floor, left the chamber, grinding everything to a halt. And this wasn't some symbolic protest that lasted 5 minutes. This was a full-blown revolt that shut down proceedings and sent leadership into emergency meetings. And the reason they did this? Because they're done. They're done being bullied by Trump. They're done being pressured to blow up the Senate's rules. They're done being told to sacrifice their institutional credibility for Trump's political demands. And they just made that crystal clear in the most dramatic way possible. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The speaker. So what we're seeing now is the wall is cracking around Donald Trump, and people are now starting to realize that maybe you can oppose him, whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene or it's dealing with the filibuster or it's opposing him on this health care bill. Maybe you can oppose him, you can push back. And if that begins to be the norm, I think we may see Trump 2.0 start faster than we thought it was going to start.
I will tell you, I wish she had stayed and served out her term, because I think that the significance of being a MAGA, Trump-loving Republican, she's voted with Donald Trump over 90% of the time, speaking out against some of the abuses of power and calling a spade a spade.
Senate rules with a simple majority vote to kill the filibuster and allow everything to pass with just 51 votes. And he's been absolutely relentless about this, posting on social media constantly, saying Republicans need to play their Trump card. Get rid of the filibuster and get rid of it now. All caps, multiple exclamation points, the full Trump pressure campaign. And the reason he wants this so badly is because of the government shutdown. Yeah, we're still in the middle of a record-breaking government shutdown, over 30 days and counting. Federal workers going without paychecks, agencies running on fumes, SNAP benefits getting delayed, and Trump has been using this as leverage to force his agenda through Congress. His plan was simple: keep the government shut down, pressure Republicans to eliminate the filibuster, then ram through a hardline spending package that includes everything he wants: immigration restrictions, border wall funding, cuts to social programs, the whole wish list with just Republican votes. No need for Democratic support, no need for compromise, just pure MAGA policy implemented by brute force. And for a while, it looked like this might actually work. Trump's base was cheering him on, conservative media was backing the strategy, and Republican senators were feeling the pressure. But then something shifted. Senate GOP leaders looked at the polls. They saw that voters were blaming Trump and Republicans for the shutdown. They heard from constituents who were furious about delayed paychecks and disrupted services. They talked to Republican senators in competitive states who were terrified about 2026, and they realized this strategy was political suicide. So leadership did something Trump absolutely did not expect. They cut a deal, a bipartisan compromise. They worked with Democrats to craft a temporary spending package that would reopen the government into January, give everyone breathing room, allow negotiations to continue without federal workers suffering. And here's the kicker. The deal included none of Trump's extreme demands: no filibuster elimination, no nuclear option, no hardline MAGA policy, just a straightforward compromise to end the shutdown and keep the government functioning. And when Trump found out, he lost it. He went ballistic, started attacking Republican senators on social media, threatening to primary anyone who supported the compromise, demanding they kill the deal and stick with his original plan. But Senate leaders moved forward anyway. They brought the compromise to the floor for debate, and that's when everything exploded. As debate opened, several Republican senators who are absolutely loyal to Trump, the true MAGA believers, they stood up and walked out, just left the chamber in protest. And this wasn't a quiet exit, this was a statement, a spectacle. Cameras caught the whole thing. News coverage described it as absolutely unprecedented. The Senate effectively on strike, leadership scrambling to figure out what to do, because you can't conduct business if senators just walk out. The whole thing ground to a halt. Emergency meetings got called. Leadership huddled behind closed doors trying to salvage the situation. And all of this was happening on live TV, the entire country watching as Trump's grip on the Senate publicly crumbled. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because after all this drama, after the walkout and the emergency meetings and the chaos, you know what happened? Trump backed down. He folded. He signaled that he would abide by the deal emerging from the Senate. The guy who spent weeks demanding the nuclear option, who insisted he would only accept his maximalist shutdown plan, who threatened to primary anyone who compromised, he just caved, said he'd accept a deal that includes none of what he demanded, and that is a massive come down, a huge political defeat, because it shows that Trump's do what I say or else strategy is starting to backfire, that Republican senators are willing to defy him, to embarrass him on national television, to cut deals he explicitly told them not to cut, and there's nothing he can do about it. His threats aren't working anymore. His social media pressure campaigns aren't moving votes. His hold over the Senate is slipping, and everyone in Washington knows it. This matters enormously heading into 2026, because if Trump can't control Senate Republicans on something as fundamental as keeping the government shut down for his demands, how is he going to control them on anything else? Tariffs, immigration, impeachment, judicial nominations, the Epstein files fight that's brewing? All of these battles require Senate cooperation. And if senators are willing to publicly revolt over the filibuster, they'll revolt over other things too. Trump's leverage is evaporating, his political capital is draining, and his allies are flipping because they've realized that loyalty to Trump might cost them their seats in 2026. So buckle up, because this Senate walkout just changed everything. Trump's grip on Congress is weaker than it's been in years, and we're about to see the consequences play out in real time. All right, let's dig into what actually happened here. Because the surface story, senators walk out, Trump backs down, everyone moves on, that misses all the important details. The real story is about power, about leverage, about what happens when a president's threats stop working. So first, understand the context. We're in the middle of the longest government shutdown in American history, over 30 days. And this isn't some partial shutdown where a few agencies close. This is a full-scale shutdown affecting hundreds of thousands of federal workers, people missing paychecks, families struggling to pay bills, government services grinding to a halt, and Trump has been using this shutdown as a weapon. He said repeatedly that he's willing to keep the government closed indefinitely until he gets what he wants, that he doesn't care about the pain it causes, that this is about principle and policy and winning. His main demand has been eliminating the Senate filibuster. Now, for people who don't follow Senate procedure closely, let me explain why this is such a big deal. The filibuster is basically a rule that says most legislation needs 60 votes to pass, not just a simple majority of 51. This means that in a closely divided Senate, you usually need some bipartisan support to get things done. Republicans can't just ram through their entire agenda on party line votes. They need to compromise, to negotiate, to find common ground with Democrats. And Trump hates this. He sees it as an obstacle to implementing his policies. He's argued that the filibuster is an outdated rule that gives too much power to the minority party, that it prevents Republicans from governing effectively when they control the Senate. And he's been demanding that Senate Republicans use the nuclear option, a procedural maneuver where they change the Senate rules with a simple majority vote to eliminate the filibuster for legislation. Now, Senate leaders have been extremely resistant to this idea, and it's not because they love the filibuster or think it's perfect. It's because they understand the long-term consequences. If Republicans eliminate the filibuster now, Democrats will use that same power when they eventually regain control of the Senate. Any slim majority will be able to pass whatever they want, which means wild policy swings every time control changes. Today, Republicans pass a national abortion ban. Tomorrow, Democrats pass Medicare for all. The next day, Republicans privatize Social Security. It becomes legislative chaos where nothing is stable, and every election becomes an existential fight for total control. Senate leaders from both parties have warned about this for years. They've said the filibuster, despite its flaws, forces moderation and compromise, that eliminating it would fundamentally change how the Senate operates, and most importantly, that once you kill it, you can never bring it back. But Trump doesn't care about any of that. He wants to pass his agenda now. He's thinking about the next 2 years, not the next 2 decades. And he's been pressuring Senate Republicans relentlessly to give him what he wants. He's posted on social media dozens of times about this, calling out individual senators, threatening to support primary challengers against anyone who opposes him, using his massive platform to mobilize his base against Republican senators who won't fall in line. And for some Republicans, this pressure has been incredibly effective. The true MAGA believers in the Senate, the ones who owe their political careers to Trump's endorsement, they've been pushing for the nuclear option, arguing that Republicans should use their power while they have it, that worrying about what Democrats might do in the future is pointless, that the only thing that matters is winning now. But there's another faction of Senate Republicans who are deeply uncomfortable with this. These are the institutionalists, the ones who've been in the Senate for decades, who remember when it functioned as a deliberative body, who worry about precedents and long-term consequences, and they've been quietly resisting Trump's demands, telling leadership that they won't vote to eliminate the filibuster no matter how much pressure Trump applies. And this created a stalemate, Trump demanding action, some Republicans ready to give it to him, but enough Republicans opposed that leadership couldn't get to 51 votes, so the nuclear option was stuck, and the government remained shut down, and public anger was building. Because here's what Trump and his allies didn't fully appreciate. Voters were turning against this strategy. Polls started showing that a majority of Americans blamed Republicans for the shutdown, that they thought Trump's demands were unreasonable, that they wanted compromise, not nuclear options in constitutional crises. And Republican senators in competitive states were watching these numbers with growing alarm. They started hearing from constituents, people who were angry about missing paychecks, small businesses that depended on government contracts, communities that relied on federal services, all of them demanding that Congress reopen the government and figure things out later. So Senate leadership made a calculated decision. They were going to end the shutdown with or without Trump's blessing. They started negotiating with Democrats on a continuing resolution, a temporary spending bill that would fund the government through January while giving everyone time to work on a longer-term deal. And they deliberately excluded Trump's demands from this compromise. No filibuster changes, no hardline immigration policies, no MAGA wish list, just a clean bill to reopen the government and stop the bleeding. When Trump found out, he went nuclear himself. He attacked Republican leadership on social media, called them weak and spineless, demanded they kill the compromise and stick with his plan. But leadership kept moving forward. They scheduled the debate, they lined up the votes, and they made it clear they had enough support from moderate Republicans and Democrats to pass this thing regardless of what Trump wanted. That's when the walkout happened. Several of Trump's most loyal Senate allies, we're talking about the MAGA diehards who never break from him, they decided to make a statement. They weren't going to sit there and participate in what they saw as a betrayal of Trump's agenda. So they walked out, left the chamber during debate, and they did it in a way that maximized media coverage, made sure cameras caught them leaving, created a dramatic moment that would dominate news coverage. The message was clear. We stand with Trump, and we're not going to be part of this surrender. But here's the thing. The walkout didn't actually stop anything. Senate rules don't require everyone to be present for a vote. As long as you have a quorum, which they did, you can proceed. So while the walkout created great television and sent a signal to Trump's base, it didn't change the outcome. Leadership pushed forward with the vote. The compromise passed, and the government reopened. And that's when Trump faced his moment of truth. He could double down, veto the spending bill, force another shutdown, and risk even more public backlash. Or he could accept defeat and move on. And after a day or two of angry tweets and vague threats, he chose option 2. He signaled he would abide by the deal. No veto, no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet acceptance that he lost this fight. Now Trump's team tried to spin this as a strategic retreat. They claimed he was being reasonable, showing flexibility, putting the country first, but nobody bought it. Everyone in Washington understood what really happened. Trump got beaten. He made demands that his own party wouldn't meet. He tried to use the shutdown as leverage, and it backfired. He threatened senators who wouldn't comply, and they defied him anyway. And in the end, he had no choice but to accept a deal that gave him nothing he asked for. This defeat has massive implications for Trump's relationship with Congress going forward, because it showed that his main source of power, the threat of primary challenges and base mobilization, has limits. Republican senators who are worried about 2026 are more afraid of angry moderate voters than they are of Trump. And once that calculation shifts, Trump loses his leverage. He can threaten all he wants, but if senators don't believe he can actually defeat them, the threats are empty. We're also seeing this play out in other areas. Trump's trying to pressure Congress on tariff policy. Some Republicans are pushing back. He wants aggressive action on immigration. Senate moderates are balking. He's demanding specific judicial nominees. The Senate Judiciary Committee is slow walking confirmations. In every case, the pattern is the same. Trump demands, some Republicans comply, but enough resist that he can't get everything he wants. And the walkout shows something else important. Even Trump's most loyal allies are starting to realize that blind obedience might not be the best strategy. Yes, they walked out to show support for Trump, but they also let the vote happen without them. They made their symbolic gesture and then stepped aside, which suggests they understand that Trump's position is weakening. That being seen as the reasonable ones who tried to fight but ultimately accepted reality might be better positioning for 2026 than going down with the ship. So we're entering a new phase of Trump's presidency, one where his control over Congress is much more tenuous, where his threats carry less weight, where senators are willing to defy him when their political survival demands it. And that's going to reshape every fight going forward. Okay, let's break down what this all means. What are the real implications? What should you be watching for? First, understand that this Senate walkout and Trump's subsequent cave represents a fundamental shift in power dynamics. For most of Trump's second term, the assumption has been that he controls the Republican Party completely, that senators would do whatever he demanded out of fear of primary challenges, that his endorsement could make or break political careers, and for a while, that was mostly true. But this shutdown fight showed the limits of that power. When Trump's demands became politically toxic, when polls show voters blaming Republicans for the shutdown, senators started calculating that defying Trump was less dangerous than obeying him. And once that calculation shifts, everything changes. Because Trump's power has always been based on fear. Fear that he'll attack you on social media. Fear that he'll endorse a primary challenger. Fear that his base will turn against you and end your career. But fear only works if people believe you can follow through on your threats. And after this shutdown debacle, a lot of Republican senators are questioning whether Trump can actually defeat them. They're looking at the polls. They're seeing that his approval numbers are dropping. They're noticing that in competitive districts, being too closely associated with Trump is becoming a liability. And they're realizing that maybe, just maybe, standing up to him is the safer political play. This is huge for everything that's coming in the next 18 months, because Trump has a long list of fights ahead. He wants to pass aggressive tariff policies. He wants to push through restrictive immigration measures. He wants specific judicial nominees confirmed. He needs Senate support for his foreign policy moves. And in every case, he needs senators to go along with controversial positions that might hurt them politically. Before this shutdown, Trump could count on near universal Republican support. Senators might grumble privately, but they fall in line publicly. Now they're doing cost-benefit analyses, asking whether supporting Trump on any given issue is worth the political risk. And if the answer is no, they're willing to break ranks. Second, pay attention to how this affects Trump's relationship with Senate leadership, because there's clearly tension there now. Leadership cut a deal Trump explicitly opposed. They advanced a compromise he demanded they kill. They let the vote proceed despite the walkout. And Trump ultimately had no choice but to accept it. That's leadership asserting institutional authority over presidential demands, and it sets a precedent. The next time Trump makes an unreasonable demand, Senate leaders can point to this episode and say, no, we're doing what's best for the institution and the party, not what's best for your political agenda. This doesn't mean Senate leadership has completely broken with Trump. They still need him. His base is still a crucial part of the Republican coalition, but it does mean they're no longer willing to be completely subservient. They're establishing some independence, some ability to push back when Trump's demands become untenable, and that fundamentally changes the power dynamic. Third, think about what this means for the 2026 midterms, because Republican senators are already positioning for that election, and the shutdown fight showed them that being seen as Trump's puppet is dangerous. Voters don't want partisan warfare and government dysfunction. They want things to work. They want compromise and competence. So Republicans in competitive races are starting to distance themselves from Trump's more extreme positions. They're voting for bipartisan compromises. They're publicly disagreeing with him on certain issues. They're trying to cultivate an image of independence and reasonableness. This is going to create problems for Trump because he needs unified Republican support to implement his agenda. But if senators are peeling off to protect themselves politically, his legislative priorities stall. His nominations face delays. His executive orders get challenged by Republicans who are supposed to be on his side. And the more he pressures them, the more they resist, because resistance itself becomes a campaign talking point. Look, I stood up to Trump. I put my constituents first. I'm not a rubber stamp. That message plays well with moderate voters. Fourth, watch how Trump responds to this defeat, because his options are limited. He can accept it and move on, which makes him look weak, or he can escalate, attacking the senators who defied him, trying to primary them, making this into an all-out war within the Republican Party. And if he chooses escalation, that creates massive problems heading into 2026. Because you can't win a general election if your party is in civil war. If Trump is actively trying to defeat sitting Republican senators in primaries, those senators are going to fight back. They're going to use their fundraising networks and institutional support to defend themselves. And they're going to position Trump as the problem, the chaos agent who's more interested in personal loyalty than in Republican victory. This could split the party in ways we haven't seen yet. Trump's base versus the establishment, MAGA candidates versus traditional Republicans. And in a closely divided Senate, that split could cost Republicans their majority, which would be disastrous for Trump's remaining time in office. Fifth, consider how this affects other pending fights, like the Epstein files controversy. Trump's been demanding full declassification and release of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Some Republicans are uncomfortable with this because the files implicate people on both sides of the aisle, including some Republican donors and allies. Before the shutdown, those Republicans might have swallowed their concerns and supported Trump anyway. Now they might break ranks. They might demand redactions or control release. They might work with Democrats to slow the process down because they've seen that defying Trump doesn't automatically end your career. The same dynamic applies to Trump's tariff policies. He wants aggressive tariffs on multiple countries, but those tariffs hurt certain industries and states. Republican senators from those states are getting pressure from constituents to oppose or modify the tariffs. And after the shutdown, those senators know they can push back without facing immediate political destruction. So Trump's going to face more resistance on tariffs, more amendments, more compromises, more battles, and all of this adds up to a weakened presidency. Trump can still get things done, but he has to work harder for them. He has to negotiate more. He has to accept compromises he would have rejected before, and that's a huge shift from where he was even a few months ago. Sixth, pay attention to Trump's approval ratings over the next few weeks, because this kind of public defeat tends to accelerate existing trends. If voters were already souring on Trump because of the shutdown, seeing him back down after threatening nuclear options could make that worse. It makes him look weaker, less in control, more subject to the political winds. And declining approval ratings make it even harder to pressure senators, because if Trump's at 38% approval in your state, you're not afraid of him anymore. You're afraid of being associated with him. So we could be entering a downward spiral where Trump's defeats lead to lower approval, which leads to more senators defying him, which leads to more defeats, which leads to even lower approval. And if that pattern holds, 2026 becomes a Republican bloodbath. Seventh, watch how conservative media covers this, because they're in a tough spot. Some outlets are true believers who will spin everything as a Trump victory. They'll claim the shutdown cave was actually strategic brilliance, that Trump played four-dimensional chess, that he got exactly what he wanted, even though it looks like defeat. But other conservative outlets are starting to get critical. They're questioning whether Trump's strategy is working, whether his approach is helping or hurting the Republican Party, whether blind loyalty serves conservative goals. And that split in conservative media creates space for Republican senators to be more independent, because if Fox News or other major outlets are questioning Trump, senators can do the same without being accused of betraying the movement. So here's the bottom line. The Senate walkout and Trump's subsequent cave represent a turning point, a moment where Trump's grip on Congress visibly weakened, where his threats stopped working, where senators realized they could defy him and survive. This doesn't mean Trump is powerless. He still has significant influence. His base is still loyal. His endorsement still matters in many races, but his control is no longer absolute. And that changes everything about how the next 18 months play out. Republicans are going to be more willing to break ranks, more willing to cut deals Trump opposes, more willing to put their own political survival ahead of Trump's agenda. And Trump's going to have to adjust. He's going to have to accept that he can't bully everyone into submission anymore, that threats only work if people believe them, and that right now, after the shutdown debacle, a lot of people don't. So keep your eyes on this. Watch which senators continue to defy Trump and which ones fall back in line. Watch whether Trump escalates or backs off. Watch how this affects upcoming legislative fights, and watch how it shapes the 2026 campaign environment. Because what happened in the Senate this week isn't just about one shutdown fight. It's about the future of Trump's presidency and the Republican Party. And that future just got a lot more uncertain. All right, that's where we are. Trump allies flipping after the Senate walkout. His grip on Congress slipping. In 2026 looking more unpredictable by the day. This is far from over, but the power dynamics just shifted in a major way. Stay tuned.